This is a training session regarding entering and changing job information. Setting up jobs is central to the operation of the Job View system. The system is specifically designed to use the job as the unit of measure for all the costs and expenses that go into running a company. For example, when timesheets, accounts payable invoices, or accounts receivable billings are entered, the majority of the time, these cost and income items will be charged to an existing job. For this reason, we must learn how to set up a job properly, so that when we go to the working modules of the system, we will have a valid job to which we can charge our items. We'll select Job Setup from the Job Costing menu. Here we see a list of all the jobs, ordered by job ID. We can also click on the Job Name column to view our jobs in alphabetic order by name. We'll edit an existing job by highlighting the job and clicking the Change button. The Job Setup window comes into view. This is the job ID. It can be any combination of letters and numbers, as long as it uses the proper number of digits as defined in the Job Costing Setup options. In this particular sample company, we are using a 3-digit job ID. Here we can enter a job name and, optionally, a classification. This job may have one or more assigned project managers or superintendents. When we click Add and attempt to select a project manager or superintendent from the drop-down list, we see that the list contains only employees who have been designated as either a project manager or a superintendent, respectively. You can add employees to the drop-down lists by clicking the Managers button and changing the designation of any employee. Moving down the screen, we have fields where we can enter the original and current contract amounts. Usually, these will be the same number when we initially enter the job. After change orders have been entered, the current contract can differ from the original contract. Here's the total budget figure, pulled from the Budget tab, and the anticipated profit, which is derived by subtracting the budget amount from the current contract amount. Below, we have the billing information. We can enter the amount billed to date, received to date, and retained to date. These amounts will be updated automatically as we process the accounts receivable billings and receipts for this job. This is the general ledger income account for this job. It will default to the job income account that was designated in the Accounts Receivable Setup Options window. Here we have the customer information. We indicate which of our customers we will be billing for this job. If the customer does not yet exist, they can be entered at this point. Up to 2 customers can be entered per job. This might come in handy if 2 different entities will be billed for payment, such as a homeowner and an insurance company. Here you can enter an estimated sales price. This field's generally used only by home builders or any contractor who will be selling the project after it's been completed. Here we have a few miscellaneous setup items. The first checkbox indicates whether the job is currently active. This will always be checked by default on new jobs. Uncheck the box to mark the job inactive. Inactive jobs cannot receive new postings and can be excluded from job costing reports. The next checkbox indicates whether the 8-hour law applies to this job. If it's checked, any employee who charges more than 8 hours of time to this job on the same day will have the hours in excess of 8 automatically converted to overtime hours during timesheet posting. The last checkbox lets you indicate whether this job will show up on the financial status and bonding report. If your company has been set up using a departmentalized income statement, use this field to indicate which department this job belongs to. The next box displays payroll tax defaults. Usually we don't set up payroll tax defaults on a job. There is a rare occasion, however, when a person's state and local tax withholding rates should switch to a different state and locality based on where the job is located. For example, let's say that your company is located in Maryland, and the majority of your employees live in Maryland and have Maryland state taxes withheld. If you have a job which is located in Virginia, you may wish to edit these fields and set up Virginia as the tax state for this job. Then, whenever a timesheet for a Maryland resident is charged to this job, the employee's tax state for withholding will be switched to Virginia for the hours charged to the job. This should be used only when necessary. Usually, you would prefer to have the state taxes withheld based on the person's state of residence. The next tab is the Budget tab. Here we can enter a budget for the job. The budget is created by adding individual cost code line items and indicating a budget amount for each. When we click the Add button, we now see a window where we can enter cost code budget information. The first thing we do is select a cost code from the dictionary of codes. I'm going to select a code for clearing and grubbing. We might need to use this code if we want to clear the job site before beginning work on the site. We can now specify what type of cost this is: labor, material, subcontract, equipment, general, or burden. In this case, we are going to send a crew of our own employees out to clear the site to prepare for our site work. So, we will select labor. The system automatically pulls in the GL control account number for labor costs. If we choose, we can enter a workers' compensation craft code, a general liability craft code, a certified payroll craft code, and a union fringe benefit table. These codes will be used in timesheet entry whenever a timesheet is charged to this budget line item. We can also indicate an additional burden percentage or dollar amount per unit here. You may have noticed that in this case, a burden percentage came in by default when we selected labor as the cost type. That's because this additional burden percentage was set up as the default when this cost code was set up in the dictionary. We also have the ability to assign this labor cost code to a billing phase. In the training sessions regarding automatic job billings and contractor draw billings, we discuss billing phases in more detail. JobView provides the ability to charge individual accounts receivable invoice line items directly to job cost codes. If you wish to use this feature, you may use this billing code field to enter the name you wish to be displayed on the individual accounts receivable invoice line item. Here you can indicate the unit price to be charged for work billed to this cost code. At the bottom of the window is the budget information. Here you can enter quantity and dollar amount budgets for this line item. In the case of this labor cost, the quantity would be the number of hours. The original and current figures will be exactly the same when we insert the budget line item. As time goes on and we add change orders, the current budget may change. Now we'll click OK to save this budget line item. The system will save the current line item and clear the window in anticipation that we're going to enter another cost code budget line item. Let's click on the cost code lookup button once again, and we'll select the same cost code, clearing and grubbing. Since we also anticipate that we're going to use our heavy equipment to clear the site, we will enter a budget for the usage of the equipment. Notice that the GL account number changes to be the default equipment expense account. We do not have to access the timesheet default fields, but we still can enter burden percentages, a billing phase, and a billing code. At the bottom, the same budget quantity and amount fields still apply. We will enter our budget figures and say OK to this line item as well. Now we're going to enter another cost code. This one will be for the purchase of materials. We will select Wire Mesh Reinforcement. We need to purchase some of this wire mesh for our concrete flatwork. Since we are going to enter a budget for the purchase of materials, we select the Material cost type. Notice once again that the GL account changes to the default for material expenses. We still do not have access to the timesheet defaults, but we do have access to the Source for Quantity Updates section. As the job progresses, the system may want us to indicate how many square feet of wire mesh reinforcement we've used on the job. It can ask for this quantity update while we are entering invoices, or it can ask us while we're entering field reports. Select the preferred method. The percent burden is still here, and we can assign this cost code to a billing phase. The budget amounts are entered in the same manner as the other cost types. Now we will enter a subcontract budget. We'll select cost code 16,000, Electrical. Now we select the subcontract cost type. This means we are going to subcontract the electrical work out to an electrical contractor. The system enables this field, which allows us to select the appropriate electrical subcontractor from our vendor list. Since we may not know at the time we're entering our budget just which of our electrical subs is going to be doing the electrical work on this job, we are not required to enter the subcontractor at this time. The subcontractor could be selected later during subcontract invoice entry. The system defaults to the correct GL account for the subcontract costs and allows us to enter the source for quantity updates. We can also enter the burden percentage and billing phase. Then, of course, we can enter our budget figures at the bottom of the window. You may notice that an extra field, the original contract field, is available when entering subcontract budgets. Let me explain the usage of the three budget fields for subcontract cost codes. Let's say that you're going to build a structure and you estimated that the electrical contract should come in at about $12,000. After the bids come in, you end up giving the contract to the low bidder at $10,000. You want to keep track of your original estimate of $12,000 and the original subcontract of $10,000. You also need to track the current contract with change orders included. These three fields allow you to track all three figures. There are two other cost types we can enter budgets for. They are the general cost type and the burden cost type. General is usually a catch-all for anything that does not fit into the other categories. The burden cost type is specifically used for tracking payroll and other burden costs on the job. There are a number of buttons below the list of cost codes that can be used for creating or upkeeping budgets. The Duplicate button allows budget line items and other information to be duplicated either from another job or from the current job. If the Different Job button is pressed, this window is displayed. We'll select the job we wish to copy from here. Now we can select what data we want to copy from that job and click the Proceed button. This feature is helpful if we are starting a job that has a budget much the same as the budget we inserted for a prior job. Once the job information from the source job has been copied, it can, of course, be modified to fit the current job requirements. Many contractors who build very similar projects will use this feature. Some will even create a dummy job with all the usual cost codes set up in the Budget tab. They will then duplicate this dummy or template job repeatedly. The other option for job duplication is to duplicate cost codes from the current job. If this option is selected, this window comes into view. This feature is usually used in connection with the Group Code field. Whenever a budget line item is entered, a group code of up to 3 digits in length can be appended after the cost type. This allows for the same cost code to be budgeted multiple times on the same job. For example, if we're building a 5-story structure, we may wish to track our costs by floor. So we will have a lumber framing labor line item, say 06101L, for each floor of the building, giving us line items for 06101L01, 06101L02, and 06101L03. To speed up the budget entry for this type of structure, we can enter all of the line items for floor number 1, each with a group code of 01. Now we'll use this feature to have the system copy all the line items that have a group code of 01 and create duplicates with a cost code of 02. Another option for creating a budget is to import one from an external estimating program or spreadsheet. This is done using this Import Budgets button. This process is covered in a separate training session. If a subcontract budget is highlighted in the list box, this Print Subcontract button will allow for printing of a subcontract form for the highlighted subcontractor. The Create Purchase Orders button will create purchase orders for all cost code budgets which have a valid item ID entered. The Adjust Imported Budgets button has to do with budgets that have been imported from an external source. The Recalc Change Orders button will recalculate current budget amounts by adding change orders to all the original budget figures. The last button we'll discuss here is the Quick Budget Entry button. Using this button, you can quickly enter a number of budget line items without having to use the full budget entry window. These budget line items will inherit all the defaults we discussed when we reviewed the budget entry window. All we need here is a cost code number and a budgeted amount and possibly quantity. The next tab is the Change Order tab. Here we can enter changes to our job contract price and/or to our job budgets. To enter a change order, click the Add button. We can give the change order an ID number and a description. These are both defined by the user. We then select a status for the change order. Internal status means this change order will affect the costs on the job, but will not affect the contract price. In other words, we will absorb the cost of this change order. The second type is an approved change order. This means the change order will change both the budget and the contract price. The third type is pending approval, and the fourth type is rejected. Now we can enter the requested change to the contract price. Here we enter the approved change to the contract price. We can then enter a series of dates. These dates are available but not required entries. We can enter the change order origination date, the date the change order was submitted to the architect or engineer, the date a response was needed, and the date the response was received from the architect or engineer. At the right-hand side of the window, we can enter change order detail, or the costs associated with the change order. Press the Add button and enter a cost code whose budget is going to change because of this change order. We can select any of our budgeted cost codes and indicate how much the quantity and dollar amount budgets will change. The changes will be either positive or negative. If this is a subcontract code, we can enter the date we submitted the change order to the subcontractor, the date we need a response, and the date he accepted the change. We can also enter a detailed description of the work to be performed by the subcontractor as a result of this change order. Once we've entered the change order detail, you will notice that the total of all our change order details will be shown in the total cost field. This total will be subtracted from the approved contract change to give us an estimated profit amount on this particular change order. In this box, we can enter a detailed description of the change order. This detailed description will show up on the printed Change Order to Owner form. When we have finished our change order entry, we click the OK button. The change order will then be included in the change order list box. We can now enter some information about our job site. As you can see, we can enter a job site address, construction dates, and descriptions of our job site and lot. The Certification tab is for jobs funded by government agencies that require us to track and report the wages paid to our employees and the crafts they worked on. We first indicate whether this is a certified job by checking this box. We can enter the governing region, the county, and the highest number of employees we anticipate having on the job. Since certification reports will be printed for this job, we have the opportunity of editing the information that will show up on the Statement of Compliance portion of the certification report. Here we can enter the contract number and the wage decision number for this job. Here you can enter the name and title of the person who submits the certification report, along with any remarks you wish to be printed. We can also specify how many payrolls have already been processed on this job. This number will be automatically incremented each time a certification report is printed for the job. You can enter a list of exceptions and their explanations here. For more information about this list, refer to your instructions for submitting the certification report. Here you can specify whether your company is the general contractor on the job or whether you are a subcontractor. If you are a subcontractor, you may enter the name and the address of the general contractor here. At the bottom, we have a very important table called the Prevailing Wage Rate Table. When we work on a certified job, the contract usually stipulates that we must pay certain craftsmen certain rates of pay. For example, all of our concrete workers must be paid a minimum of $26.50 an hour, plus a certain package of fringe benefits. Now, a certain employee's wage may be only $21.50 per hour, but when he works on a concrete trade on this particular certified job, he must be paid the $26.50 an hour plus the package of benefits. Here we can enter a table that shows all the crafts that will be worked on, along with their prevailing wage rates and union fringe benefit tables. These will be used as defaults during timesheet entry. On the next tab, the Architect tab, we can enter the name and address of our architect firm, along with some information about the project. On the Financing tab, we can enter the bank name and address, along with some information about the bank loan. The Billing Information tab is used to set up job billing features. In the Accounts Receivable module, we can create line item or progress billings for any job by hand. However, the system can automatically create job billings based on your costs or other preset factors if you make use of the settings on this tab. Here you can enter the contract date, the contract number, and default retention rate. Over here, you can select from a list of billing types. The automatic job billing and contractor draw billing types are discussed in separate training sessions. The unit price billing is very seldom used, so we won't go into it here. The time and materials option is used for jobs that are small or of short duration, the kind you will probably only bill once. If a job is designated as a T&M job, then the system merely tracks whether the job has been billed or not. This way, you can view a list of all unbilled T&M jobs, with an option to quickly generate a bill for any job on the list. Mostly, this option is here to keep you from letting small jobs slip through the cracks and not get billed in a timely fashion. The next tab is the Notes tab. Here we can insert any note we want to be associated with this job. After clicking the Add button, we can enter the date, a subject, and a large note.
You can assign your note one or more special behaviors. Just tag the appropriate behaviors in this list box, and the system will display this note at the appropriate times during transaction entry.
Here you can enter the name of the salesman or foreman on the job. Here you can indicate how frequently you will bill the customer for work done on this job, and which AR tax code should be used to calculate taxes on AR billings. The system will update this last billing date field each time you generate a billing for this job. Here you can enter a purchase order number that will show up on all billings. And finally, here you can enter a tax percentage that will be the default for job purchase orders. The next tab is the User Defined tab. The column on the left, the Prompt column, can be edited so that you have a user-defined set of categories of information to track for all jobs. If we place a tick in the Edit Prompts checkbox, we can then change the name of the category. For example, we can create a category called Elevation. This category will be used to specify the elevation of the job site. We turn off the Edit Prompts checkbox, and now the Elevation category becomes a permanent prompt for all jobs. We can now enter the elevation for this job site on the right. The next tab is the Attachments tab. Here we can physically attach any document to this job. This includes photographs, spreadsheets, Word documents, PowerPoint presentations, scanned documents, or anything else that can be stored as a computer file. Once we've finished entering all our job information, we click the OK button, and our saved job is included in the job list box on the Browse window. The legend at the bottom indicates that if a job is listed in green, the job is inactive. If the job is listed in red, the job is closed to new transactions. If either of these states is applied to an existing job, the job will be treated and processed differently from the other jobs in the system. We'll click the Close button, and now we are finished with this training session on entering and changing jobs.